Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Ford, Lincoln, Kia, Hyundai. Great new inventory. Fabulous pre-owned inventory. With a great sales staff and an awesome service department, it's all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Well, the last 90 seconds of the game last night took 7 hours and 22 minutes to play, but it finally culminated in this one.
Crowder looking, throws it alley. Oh! Hayden puts it down! He puts it down! It's over! And they're trying to say goaltending, but that's a live basketball. He can finish it. What a perfectly executed play. Ayton guides it in beautifully. What an incredible job by Monty Williams designing that play to perfection.
I want to give praise specifically to the broadcast team last night. Mike Breen, Jeff Van Gundy, Mark Jackson, in particular Mark Jackson. I think Jeff Van Gundy normally is really, really good. Last night I thought Mark Jackson shined. Mark Jackson's the one that talked about how the alley-oop is not a goaltending play. On an inbounds play, it cannot be goaltending. He's the one that talked about how the Clippers had to put the same 5 guys on the floor that defended the play because it was a review and not a timeout, and the Clippers were out of timeouts. He did a great job of guiding, Mark Jackson did, the fans through the rules last night. I thought he was terrific. And a lot of credit due to Mark Jackson. Jeff Van Gundy, I always think is very, very good. I thought Mark Jackson shined last night. And then Mike Breen, who's always great. I mean, Mike is just terrific. At one point, he talked about how many replays were going on. And it just took away from the full experience of the game last night. Because, number one, the level of play was not very good last night. It just wasn't. It really was not a good game. Had an exciting finish, but it wasn't a good game. And the replays took so long, it just took everything away from it last night. I mean, I kept sitting there and waiting and waiting and waiting. I mean, I broadcast a baseball game last night, came home and started watching that game. It's like, okay, when's it going to end? All right. Great to have on the show Dennis Dodd, who is, I don't think there's anybody that has covered the issues of intercollegiate athletics better than Dennis. We've talked about it many times because Dennis knows that we, too, talk about the same issues. Dennis, welcome back. Great to have you with us.
Steve, how are you? Good. Thank you.
Doing great. Okay, so Alston happened this week, and Alston, the basic premise of Alston was it dealt with the tools needed within your scholarship, a laptop, a computer, an iPad, maybe even a printer scanner, whatever. But it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. I thought it was the biggest ruling since Oklahoma, Georgia in '84. What was your thought? Yeah. Yeah. Why did you think it was? I gave my reasons. What did you think? Why did you think it was?
Because you can draw a direct line from Board of Regents in '84, which deregulated college football television, to Monday, because that created the, I would say, unregulated pot of money that eventually attracted lawyers when student athletes, when players weren't getting enough of it. And it was big enough that they could collect their 30% fees, and that made it matter. So even going back then, it's the NCAA's fault. I think in anybody's mind, looking at the landscape today, it would be ridiculous to think the NCAA had right limit exposure of college football to 2 or 3 games a day, and that's what it was for folks that don't remember. So you've got this money sitting there. It eventually got to the Supreme Court case, and the NCAA, for what reasons I don't know, decided to die on this hill of what you just described as very narrow education-based benefits that are capped at about $6,000 a year per student, like laptops and internships and stuff like that. I'm not going to comment. Well, I will comment on their legal strategy. I think it was dumb. So
yes,
in losing
agreed.
the case, not only did they lose, they were smacked down back to the Stone Age, 9-0. And Brett Kavanaugh, who no one would think is pro-labor, given why he was appointed to the court, told the NCAA, not only gave his opinion, but said, don't bring this stuff before us again, because anything you do in terms of athlete compensation is going to be subject to antitrust violations. And so at that point, I think the NCAA, big picture, became a fly on the wall to the whole enterprise.
No, exactly. It did. Because I made a joke when the ruling came down. I said, well, the NCAA can take solace out of the minority opinion. Oh, wait, there wasn't one.
Right. Right. Who had Sean Alston in 9? That was
yeah, Sean Alston in 9. That's right.
They covered 9 judges. Yeah.
I mean, Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett all agreed. That tells you something.
Clarence Thomas. Yeah.
Yes,
Everybody.
Clarence Thomas. Everybody along the way. So what does this do in the end for the relevancy of the NCAA, in your opinion?
Well, like I said, as I wrote Monday, I think this is the end of amateurism as we know it, whatever that is. I don't know if I can define it right now. And probably, maybe one day the NCAA along with it. I think what this leaves, big picture for the NCAA, is for now to oversee maybe eligibility and enforcement. People don't think they do that very well. And then they throw a heck of a party every March. And that's their value. It's come to that. That's why I don't think there'll be a breakaway. I don't think the presidents have stomach for – they could do it. They could form their own division and have their own basketball tournament, but there'd be too much heavy lifting. So I think the NCAA survives, but as a bit player. I mean, you already see the college football playoff as an LLC, a separate company. It's going to triple its playoff, double or triple its income, and those 130 schools in FBS, particularly the 65 in Power 5, are going to control all that money. So it's almost a separate situation, or a separate company with the college football playoff. But the NCAA will not be as powerful as it was after Monday, and to the point that they're not even going to control by July 1st what NIL rules are. There's now an alternative solution being developed that is meant as a workaround, because the NCAA can't put guardrails around any NIL legislation right now. They'd be sued back to the Stone Age.
Which then brings me to that issue, because in the fall of 2019, California passed and Governor Newsom signed their bill, which goes into effect on January 1st, 2023. So I remember when it came up, I said, well, okay, that gives the NCAA some time. Then June 12th, a year ago, Florida passed and Governor DeSantis signed their NIL bill. Now the clock's ticking. Why since June 12th? Because I don't care what anybody says. A year is a long time. Last I checked, we just have been living through a pandemic. It felt like a long time to me.
Yeah.
Why haven't they been able to come up with something, or at least look at the 6 states that have passed it and cherry-pick the parts they liked and tweak the parts they didn't?
Because they've been incompetent. Steve, they had a chance to address this 15 years ago when Ed O'Bannon saw his face on the cover of that video game. They could have stepped right in and said, let's start making some accommodations that these players that are on these games can share some of the revenue. It doesn't professionalize them. In fact, what we're talking about now doesn't professionalize them. But at every turn, they defended a model that is the only one like it in the world, and is frankly indefensible. When you talk about Judge Kavanaugh said it, $1 billion. billion-plus industry where the players get comparatively nothing, and the labor is built on their backs. And I don't want to hear about a free scholarship. You know what they have to do for that free scholarship? A Pac-12 study found that athletes, not football players, all athletes work about 50 hours a week. That's more than a 40-hour-a-week paying job at their sports because they are compelled to. And legislation, Steve, had to be put in that no team could practice after midnight or before 6 a.m. You know why?
You're right.
Somebody out there was doing it. So don't tell me that's a free scholarship.
No, I mean, the legendary John Chaney practiced at 5 a.m.
Yeah. I
mean, you and I know that. Yeah. And not only, but let's put the 50 hours into perspective here for everybody. Remember, that still doesn't include the schoolwork they have to do. That's just the sport.
I was just going to say that. I said, and you're supposed to be, and that's why they're herded into easy classes, classes that they don't want to take and pursue their, what they wanted to come to school for. We've seen example after example of that they're done by, noon, so they can get taped and go to practice, and then they have to start their homework at 8 at night. So the NCAA, the hypocrisy of the NCAA is that the experience should be as close to the normal student as possible. Well, the normal student can start a YouTube channel and not tell the school anything about its contract or how much he earns. In this situation, they're even making players disclose their contracts. I don't know.
Right, exactly. Right, exactly. Which now brings me to this. An area where Mark Emmert, and this is where he has failed as a witness before the Senate, he's failed as a witness in the O'Bannon trial, where he starts talking about the ivory tower feel of a university. He talks about that. Instead of just saying, hey, look, let me defend this by saying this is where the money goes. And you talk about men's soccer, women's soccer. When I read Justice Kavanaugh's opinion, I was impressed by the fact that he threw Title IX in there.
Yeah.
And said you can make it. That told me something, that the NCAA is in an absolute box because the Supreme Court justice brought up what potentially could be your argument, which, by the way, you didn't make, and said it's not going to be good enough in this case.
Yeah. You know why he threw Title IX in there? Because he sees into the future. In fact, I wanted to make that point, that all these justices, more or less, had grown up, quote unquote, in this age that we're talking about since '84, when college sports has blown up. So they knew what the subjects were. Title IX is an issue because this is going to be the cascading effect of the NCAA's inaction. I just talked to someone today who told me that the average increase in athletic budget because of this decision on Monday is going to be $1 million. I said, that doesn't sound like much. The person said, you know what, it does sound like much when you've got to pay for swimming or equestrian or something like that. And so there's going to be a broad, as it stands right now, a broad dropping of sports, as if there haven't been a lot already this year, I think, this academic year, or more than ever. So 11 dropped at Stanford and then reinstated. That's not the point. The point is that the Title IX situation is teams and athletic departments are going to go to where their revenue is, and that's football and basketball, and all they're going to care about, in general, these are all generalities, is balancing those 85 scholarships and those 15 scholarships. Give me 100 women on the other side, and we can't be sued. Everything else gets cut. Again, that's hyperbole, but that's where it's headed. There's going to be a lot of club sports jumping up here lately, Steve.
Okay, now, obviously, CBS Sports, and in particular, you've done a great job in this. Athletic attained a memo on this, and it's Mark Emmert. And I know you've looked at it, so I'm not. But I'm going to inform the audience of what's in it. And basically, Emmert said that he wanted to develop interim solutions so that student athletes, no matter which state they're enrolled in, would be able to take advantage of NIL opportunities. Equally important, we remain committed to working with Congress to chart a path forward. Look, that's kind of an empty suit memo. How did you view it?
He's trying to take credit for what is happening, going to happen inevitably. There's going to have to be a solution beyond the NCAA, as I mentioned in the front. Whatever they put forward with their name on it is going to be slapped down and susceptible to antitrust violation. What's going to happen, it'll be couched a different way, but the players will make deals with conferences and or schools, thereby lessening the legal liability. In other words, if a player doesn't like what a school is offering, the school can say, go somewhere else. It's not a collusion. They're horizontal partners. They're going to be, in football, 130 options. So we're not colluding. We're just telling you that we capped this income at X. That essentially leaves the NCAA out, because the NCAA can't say that. But the schools and the conferences can. I'm not saying it eliminates legal liability. It lessens it.
All right, so this will be two parts, short-term, long-term. A week from tomorrow, we get to July 1st. Florida, Alabama, Texas, Mississippi, Georgia, New Mexico, their name, image, and likeness laws go into effect. Now, by the way, each state, they're all different. They are not unified rules. They're all different in each state, but they do go into effect. So short-term, how do you see this playing out? And then long-term, what is the potential solution, and is that solution Congress?
The short-term solution is that on midnight on July 1st, there will be athletes that hit the send button for $500,000 deals. In some places, in some states. Small percentage, because not everybody's going to get that money. We know that. And I don't think there's any way that stops. The market, in other words, Steve, the market will decide. Just like the market decides what a house is worth, how much you're going to pay for a car, what somebody can demand for a pound of turkey, that's what will happen. It's a market that's been created out of nothing. It'll be very interesting to see where it goes, but it will be there, and it will be interesting to watch. There are there are earning opportunities that we haven't even thought of.
Yes,
that will be out there. Just given social alone, there are things out there that the NCAA hasn't even thought of. Now, as far as relief from Congress, it's not coming anytime soon. They break on July 20th, I think, and don't come back till September. So it's going to be the wild, wild west of all this stuff going on. And even then, I don't know if Congress now has the stomach to give an antitrust exemption, given what the Supreme Court just said. And we've already seen that push become politicized, like any bill on the Hill does. The Republicans want an antitrust exemption and maybe, help with the states. The Democrats want more on the back end with long-term medical care, post-graduation, and insurance. So can they come together? It looks less and less like they can, and it may die there. That's what I'm saying. Either the NCAA has lost its ability to define amateurism, because either whatever they put forward isn't going to stick legally, and if they get help from Congress, it's like an episode of Shark Tank. You're selling 50% of the company. The federal government is going to define college athletics into a smaller term, what eligibility is and what compensation is. Does everybody want that? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I don't understand how you can be an organization and allegedly work on something for a year, because the clock's been ticking since June 12th last year. Oh, yeah, right, more than a year. But I'm saying the clock really started ticking June 12th last year. Like, now the pressure's on, we better do something. But it's been going on for 15 years. And expect Congress to bail you out. That's your strategy?
Yeah. That became official policy. I was at a AD's meeting in September of 2019 in Washington, D.C., where Mark Emmert told this group of ADs, he said this, NIL is an existential threat to college athletics. In December, 3 months later, he's photographed with his arm around Cory Booker and all these senators and Congress. We need your help. Well, something changed there. Sounds like a lot of hypocrisy to me, where he's telling those ADs in private one thing and then reaching out to give away the farm, which the NCAA, by the way, was, said they would never do. We don't need the federal government in our in our business. Now they can't function. Now they can't continue without the federal government, literally.
So I would say it's unbelievable, except here's the problem I have. It actually is believable. Because you and I know who some of the players are in this. It is believable.
Yeah. So what this memo is that there's not much new in it. I would pay attention to the last page where Emmert says we're working with divisional governance bodies. You know what? The divisional governance bodies are working with themselves to make deals with athletes right now. He's trying to take credit for it. So it will have the NCAA's name on it, but it will be the conferences providing a solution for themselves when you see it.
Yeah, which is also the same group that's providing the $600 million to maybe $1.2 billion increase in football money they'll get. It's not going to come from the NCAA. It'll be the conferences that'll work it out.
Well, it'll be the TV partners because it's worth it, and there'll be more money in the system. And who's to say the players don't get bonuses for making the playoffs? I mean, you can already see it. This would be allowed under NIL. You give them all a bonus, all 12 teams, for making the playoffs, and that gives them access to any player for any commercial. And let's say they take the top 4 quarterbacks and put them in a commercial for the playoffs selling Coke. You're going to see it. You're going to see it.
Amazing times.
Yeah.
Amazing times, and as always, amazing analysis. Dennis, you've been all over every inch of this, and I'm going to tell you I've already had several text messages from people saying how much they've learned just by listening to this in the last 20 minutes. No, seriously, this is educational for the fan. I mean, these are things that you and I talk about all the time, but part of what when you do something like this, part of the job of the show is to help educate people. You've just done that, so.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Steve.
Hey, Dennis, it's always a pleasure. Thank you. Dennis Dodd, CBS Sports. We'll come back. More in a moment. Great to have you with us today. Brought to you by Sunbury Motors on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
When it comes to car buying, there's the other guy's way, and then there's the SMC way. The other guys force you into a vehicle you really don't want. The Sunbury Motors way lets you take the time you need to browse, ask questions, and take the test drive and think on it. For over 100 years, the Mertz family and all their employees have made your experience the most pleasant one you'll ever have. The other guys won't offer you the best price for your trade, no matter how much they say they will. The SMC way is their promise to provide you with the most money the market shows your vehicle is worth. The SMC way is to offer you all applicable factory rebates on new vehicles and generous discounts. Looking for a pre-owned vehicle? The SMC way checks each vehicle in a 200-mile radius to determine the lowest price, then beat it. It's the lowest price promise, just part of the SMC way. The choice is up to you, the other guy's way or the SMC way. The SMC way wins every time. Sunbury Motors Company in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury, and at sunburymotors.com. Selling more cars and satisfying more customers for over 100 years.
Taking your calls at 800-795-9565. This is The Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now, from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
All right, Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia routes 11 and 15, Hummels Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Ford, Lincoln, Kia, Hyundai. Sunbury Motors has them all. And great pre-owned inventory. Fabulous sales staff that works with you. Service department's great, all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia routes 11 and 15, Hummels Wharf, online at sunburymotors.com. After the uplifting interviews with Joe Putnam and Dennis Dodd, we now get to the downer of the show. No, it's not the suit. The suit sends the show into the abyss. No, we're going to talk for a little bit about the Pirates. Oh, I know. I apologize to the audience, but they are carried in the area. So we bring in Chris Mack for the uplifting part of the show. Chris, welcome.
Glad I've been brought in to bring the mood down, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime we talk about the Pirates, it really opens the door to the dark room. They've somehow, some way won 3 consecutive games or something, 3 or 4 or something like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It probably has the city really stirred up, right?
Oh, yes. People are – no, I can't even pretend for a moment. It's better than a 10-game losing streak.
Yeah.
People know what this season is, I think. They're frustrated by it in different ways, but I think most people who consider themselves fans of this team and fans of sports in general in Pittsburgh, we all knew what we were getting into this season, and that there's going to be a lot of growing pains, and that includes the guys on the field as well as the bench boss. Derek Shelton's had his moments as well, so it's a matter of getting through those ups and downs and trying to find the silver linings in the clouds, which I think to this point have been that the guys that you see at the top of lists for trade deadline acquisitions are guys like Adam Frazier and Richard Rodriguez. And if Tyler Anderson can get some things back together to where he was at the beginning of the season, maybe he moves as well, and they continue to fortify the system for where they'd like to be in, say, 3 to 4 years from now.
Okay, before I get to this, are the Pirates not at 100% yet on capacity?
Yeah, they're permitted to be, but they haven't. They sold their tickets in monthly blocks, and I guess their reasoning was they wanted to, even after restrictions were completely lifted on outdoor events, they wanted to open things up with they wanted to finish June the way they had started June and sort of start fresh in July. So July 1st will be the date where they sell 100, or they put 100% of tickets on sale, and they have a lot of plans for that weekend, that 4th of July weekend. They're calling it a reopening weekend, and there is a decent amount of buzz, I think, for people that just want to get back out to the ballpark, knowing again exactly what kind of team they're seeing. But the Mets and Phillies are both coming into town over the next month or so. Those always bring decent crowds. And if it's a nice weekend, there are worse places to be than on the shores of the Allegheny watching a little baseball with a hot dog and a beer.
Well, no question. I mean, from the pure entertainment part,
right?
And to get out there in a ballpark, green grass, the whole thing, that's awesome. I mean, so and in that setting, because PNC Park has about as breathtaking a setting as any I've seen in sports. Period. I think it's phenomenal. But back to the club for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
How can you win over fans if that you finally get somebody that has some traction, Frazier, Reynolds, and instead of building around them, you deal them?
I think in the case of Frazier, people understand that he's probably not going to be around the next time this team is good anyway, right? He's got another year of arbitration after this year, and then he's going to hit the free agent market, and I think people are realistic enough to understand that. I don't necessarily buy into the Brian Reynolds trade talk. I think that unless they got a haul in return, it would not make a lot of sense, because you can see him being a part of the next good Pirates team because of the way Major League Baseball contracts are structured. He'll be around for another few years, and he's a Super 2 guy, so it's an extra year of arbitration. But he's a guy that's shown himself outside of the little blip of last year, and last year being what it was. He's shown himself to be routinely productive near the top of the order. He's taken over center field, something they weren't really able to find anybody to take over since Starling Marte was dealt. So I think he's valuable and will be valuable going forward. So I don't know if Ben Cherington is necessarily listening to a lot of calls on him. But as far as Frazier goes, I mean, it's still a system that needs to get more pitching and needs to find more, I would think, corner infield and corner outfield power. They still don't have their next catcher in the system anywhere, which is why a lot of people think they may eschew one of the Vandy pitchers and go with the kid from Louisville with that first overall pick, because he's a catcher and he could be here in 3 years. So they've still got a lot of building to do, and that's where the ability to deal a guy like Frazier, who again isn't probably going to be a part of the next winning Pirates ball club, comes into play.
What is Ben Cherington's record of getting What is Ben Cherington's record of getting prospects when he makes a deal? Because I can tell you right now, the biggest deal he made in Boston was when he dealt Crawford and he dealt Gonzalez, and he sent him to Los Angeles. To be honest with you, he and obviously Josh Beckett was in that deal. And in that deal, what he did was he rid the Red Sox of $250 million in salaries, which was huge. Which he then translated into, like a Johnny Gomes comes as a free agent and Victor Reno comes in as a free agent. But the prospects he got in return, not one of them was worth. I mean, the whole point was getting rid of salary, not prospects. So what's his track record?
I mean, you laid out how things worked for him in Boston. I think, the strategy here in Pittsburgh obviously doesn't involve shedding salary. There's no salary left to shed, really. So I will say, the reviews on some of the guys they've acquired to this point in some of these deals is not bad. Leover Peguero, who they got from the Arizona organization in the Starling Marte deal, is probably one of their future middle infielders, or at least has been talked about as such, or becomes trade bait in the future to acquire, because they are jammed up. There's a big log jam in the middle infield for this organization going forward. Right. He didn't necessarily hit a home run with the Josh Bell deal, I don't think, but then the Joe Musgrove deal, I mean, I think he did a great job with that as well. To this point, we'll see how it all flushes out in the end. I think, he's lucky, I think, in that he's got a couple of pieces right now, a few pieces maybe, that are all in positions to be coveted by more than one team. Every team could use a back end of the bullpen guy, and Rodriguez has been dependable this year. Every team could use a swing starter, long man in the bullpen, and Anderson, more often than not, has been reliable to eat up innings this year. There's plenty of teams, Yankees included, White Sox, who they're playing today, included, who could use a guy to eat up starting at-bats while one of their currently injured starters gets healthy, and then play sort of a super utility role like Frazier could do. I mean, he's been first or second in the National League in hits for the better part of 6 weeks now. So they have the opportunity, if Cherington can, maybe leverage a couple of teams against each other, to at least get some packages that look good now. Whether those shake out in the end, I mean, that's the $1 million question.
It's a hard way to live, isn't it?
It's a hard way. It's a hard way to be a fan, to be quite honest.
That's my point. My point is, to be a fan, you have to sit back and go, oh, great. Yeah. So, I mean, do I show up in 2025? Or do you want me to go right now?
And it's tough when you see. I think if it weren't for the Rays being so successful, because the Rays are the one that everybody points to, right? They can't sell out. They're in Florida. They're playing on a concrete warehouse. They can't sell it out, even though they're one of the best teams in baseball. Right. They've got all these electrifying players. You see Wander Franco do what he did last night. Glasnow when he's healthy. Meadows, and obviously we're talking former Pirates prospects now, which really drives Pirates fans nuts. But to see that team routinely put it together and have very few multi-year dips, to see the A's almost every year at least be in some sort of fringe contention, right, in a tough division, to see teams like that continue to remain competitive, it does. It makes it hard to swallow. And it's why, a certain amount of the fan base, I'll be honest, it does feel has sort of checked out until they can tell that this team is going to be good again. It doesn't mean they're not Pirates fans anymore. It just means they're not actively engaged in checking the box score in the morning or watching the game on a given night. If they happen to be, if there happens to be nothing else on, they'll flip it on. Sure, have the game on in the background, see what the Pirates are doing. But they're not engaged like they were certainly in 2013 through 2015, or even in the 1 or 2 years both following and previous to that, when you had the rise of the McCutchen era team and then the fall and tear down of that era. From 2010 to 2016 or 17, it felt like there were a lot more active fans than where we're at right now.
Well, the fans were awesome in those years. Not good, they were awesome.
Yeah.
But this is not Ben Cherington's fault. So this has nothing to do with Ben Cherington. But as somebody who's watched prospects, Vermont was Oakland, Lowell was Boston, Staten Island was New York. Right. And of course I see what the Cardinals were doing here at State College.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom line is the Pirates were out-drafted. The Pirates had the prime draft picks and got outdrafted by people. Mike Trout's in the late 20s. Okay, Aaron Judge in the late 20s. I'm watching Mookie Betts play second base in Lowell. They could have had any of these guys, and they made other picks instead. And you know what? More often than not, the Pirates were the team. We'll take the high school guy. You'll take the high school guy? Really?
Well, and I'll be curious to see. And again, you're right. That's not Ben Cherington's track record.
It is not.
But I do find I will be curious to see. When the draft comes around next month, how much of an appetite do they have for a high school player? I'd love to see them take Jack Leiter or Kumar Rocker from Vanderbilt. Lean a little bit more lighter. But
look, I think that level right now in the SEC, right? That's almost a double-A level.
It is. I mean, those are guys that are only going to take 2 to 3 years to be major league ready. And that what will be concerning for me is not necessarily, if they take one of these 2 high school shortstops that are ranked near the top of the draft pool, it won't be so much that they chose the high school shortstop over the Vanderbilt pitchers. It'll be more that it signals, hey, we're not really we don't know if we're 2 or 3 years away yet. We think we might be more like 4 or 5 years away. And that would be concerning to me as a fan, because that tells me, and again, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but wherever they go in the draft is going to give me a little bit of a bead on where Ben Cherington and everybody else in the organization thinks they are on their timeline. If they go with some high school shortstop who, again, may end up being the next Manny Machado, we don't know. They passed on the first Manny Machado for Jamison Tyone. So if it ends up being that, great, but it still means you're probably waiting a little bit longer than maybe you even originally thought you would as a Pirates fan to see your team be good again.
Because let's face it, I told this story the other day, about my mother-in-law had a poster on the wall, and it was a sheep standing on a rock with a dopey look on its face. For some reason, everybody said it kind of looked like me. But that was a different story. And the sheep is standing on the rock with a dopey look on its face, and it says, "I'm so far behind, I think I'm first." Ladies and gentlemen, your 2021 Pittsburgh Pirates. Yep.
If it weren't for the Diamondbacks and the Orioles, they'd be in the basement. So, I mean, it is. It's frustrating, and as a fan, it's nobody enjoys being the fan of the rebuilding team. And the Orioles can certainly sympathize. Their fans can with that. But
the Oriole rebuild's been longer.
I know. It's the never-ending rebuild. And I think the hope here in Pittsburgh is just that we don't end up with that again here, with another long losing streak of, forget 20 years, but 10 or 15 years. I'll be honest, I don't know if the fans of Pittsburgh can withstand that. Like this team, if it's another 4 or 5 years, hey, it is what it is. But if they get back to the playoffs in another 4 or 5 years, I think a lot of fans will say, okay, we're back. We'll reserve judgment for what happens from here on out. But if this rebuild doesn't work, if Cherington doesn't bring the organization back to relevance, then what few hangers on are left will just continue to fall by the wayside.
What's more frustrating right now, the Pirates, in part because it's expected, or the fact the Penguins can't advance?
I think the Penguins are probably more frustrating because I'll be quite honest, we're spoiled with the Penguins.
They're good.
And I mean that in the nicest way possible.
Yep.
For the past, let's see, 1984, what's this, 2021? So for the last 4 decades, essentially, we've been lucky enough to be blessed with one of the 2 or 3 most talented players in the world. In our city, whether it was Mario Lemieux or Jaromir Jagr or Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin at the same time. And because of that, we expect the team to be good. The years from 2009 to 2016 were painful, not just because of the Crosby concussion issues, but because you wondered, are these guys ever going to fulfill their promise again? And they win back-to-back cups, and then it's just for Penguins fans, and I lump myself in this category because I am a Penguins fan, nothing's ever enough. But it's frustrating when you have that level of talent and a really good coach, to be honest, and Mike Sullivan. He knows exactly what he's doing, but you can't piece it all together. And now you're looking at guys at 34, 35 years old.
Right.
Crosby, Malkin, Letang, they're not getting any younger.
Yeah. That's why
you bring up Mike Sullivan, who is a terrific coach. It's one thing about Derek Shelton. I can't tell in a million years right now whether he's a good manager or not.
I can't either, and that's. I mean, he's 130 games in or so. Yeah. So, like I said, there are going to be growing pains there too.
Right, but you can't. But I can't tell because, look, he doesn't. There are no moves to make. He can't make any moves to let you know whether he's out, and he's just trying to He's in the middle of games trying to just put Band-Aids out on there, and occasionally a tourniquet.
Yeah, and the one thing to keep an eye on, we've talked about it the last couple of weeks on our show down here, is the one starting pitcher for some reason that he lets work deep into ball games is Tyler Anderson.
Yeah, I know.
And nobody else has really given JT Brubaker was lifted after like 76 pitches the other day, and he was dealing. He did something similar to Will Crow. He let Will Crow hit for himself in the fifth inning last week one day, and then takes him out after a 10-pitch walk the following half inning. It's just those are young guys that you want to see tested. You want to see them try to push through adversity, and those are the ones he's listing early. But then he's leaving Tyler Anderson, who everybody knows what Anderson is, and again, like I said, he's probably trade bait at the deadline if you can get anybody to bite and give you anything worthwhile. That's not the guy I need to see you give a longer leash to.
Right.
I need to see you give the longer leash to the young guy to see if he can fight through that adversity and those obstacles.
No offense, what do you got to lose?
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. You're bound for 100 losses anyway. You might as well find out what you have and how many of these guys are going to be around in 3 or 4 years.
Chris, it's always a lot of fun to have you on. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Always great to be with you.
What an uplifting segment. Our thanks to Chris Mack. Back with more in a moment on News Radio 1070 WKOK, brought to you by Sunbury Motors. Hey, great to have you with us today. Hope you enjoyed it. Check it out on the Steve Jones Show podcast, Dennis Dodd's interview, in particular on the NCAA name, image, and likeness and the future after what happened with the Supreme Court ruling this week of Alston versus the NCAA. Again, the NCAA could take great solace in the minority opinion. Oh, wait, there wasn't one. Wow. As Dennis said, Alston +9. Who would have thought that? Also, Joe Putnam, Chris Mack for being on the show today. Great to have you with us as well. And Matt did a great job of whining, moaning, and complaining about the Yankees.
You did, too, on MLB and NBA issues.
No, I didn't complain. That was all factual. I have no dog in the hunt.